Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Min Geunhye with our foreign journalists Frank and Koichi. Thank you for being here.
Good to be back, thanks.
So, what were some of the stories that you covered since we last met? We'll start with you, Koichi.
Of course, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's New Year's statement and address. And I was happy to hear that he might send the delegation to Pyeongchang Olympics.
남조선에서 머지않아 열리는 겨울철 올림픽 경기대회에 대해 말한다면 그것은 민족의 위상을 과시하는 좋은 계기로 될 것이며 우리는 대표단 파견을 포함하여 필요한 조치를 취할 용의가 있으며 이를 위해
But also I thought just we need to cope with the nuclear issue separately.
Right. What about you, Frank?
I covered the same type of story, of course, Kim Jong-un's much anticipated New Year's address, and then the response from the South Korean government in terms of further extending the invitation and North Korea's response to that in the affirmative by reconnecting that hotline at Panmunjom between the two Koreas, and then moving toward getting a delegation and North Korean athletes to participate in the Olympics. I think it'll be, what's really interesting to me is the political implications of this in terms of the South Korea-US alliance and the annual military drills that usually take place in the spring, and Moon Jae-in's proposal that those drills be delayed in order for a sort of peaceful atmosphere for the Olympic Games.
All right, we'll probably have to wait and see. Right, well, just before marking an end to 2017, the nation was thrown into turmoil following news of a secret deal between Seoul and Tokyo amid the 2015 accord regarding the issue of sexual slavery by Japanese soldiers of Korean women and girls during World War II. We have details in our first report. On December 27th, 2017, an investigative report shook up diplomatic relations between Korea and Japan. A task force launched last July to review the wartime sexual slavery agreement between Seoul and Tokyo revealed that there had been a secret accord within the agreement in 2015.
위안부 합의는 고위급 비공개 협의에서 주로 이루어졌고 국장급 협의는 조연에 불과했습니다. 실질적인 내용은 고위급 협의에서 논의되었고 고위급 협의 개시 후 국장급 협의는 역할이 제한적이었습니다.
The secret deal included three major demands from Japan: the relocation of the peace statue in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul, the refrain from support by the Korean government for future installations of the statue, and the ban of the word sex slaves. In response, the Korean government pledged to make efforts to resolve the statue issue and to use the term comfort women. Moreover, the truth behind the word irreversible triggered further public anger. The Korean delegation had used the term to emphasize irreversible apology, but it was revealed that the context was changed to irreversible agreement during the secret deal. A day after the statement by the task force, President Moon Jae-in declared that the wartime sexual slavery agreement in 2015 between Seoul and Tokyo cannot be accepted.
지난 합의가 양국 정상의 추인을 거친 정부 간의 공식적 약속이라는 부담에도 불구하고 저는 대통령으로서 국민과 함께 이 합의로 위안부 문제가 해결될 수 없다는 점을 다시금 분명히 밝힙니다.
As expected, Japan was quick to express discontent, and relevant officials have brushed aside the possibility of renegotiations.
政府としては引き続き韓国側に対し粘り強くありとあらゆる機会に合意の着実な実施このことを強く求めていきたい。
The secret deal, which was revealed 2 years after its agreement. There is much interest now on how this will affect the relationship between Korea and Japan. Now, I assume you covered news of the announcement by the task force that was set up by the Moon Jae-in administration. Tell us a bit about your report first. We'll start with you, Frank.
Well, I just do really short 2-minute reports for Press TV, video reports, so I don't get to cover the issues as in-depth as I would like. I think what's interesting about this is the debate that we might have regarding public and private diplomacy. Now, the UN Secretary General Guterres has said that he favors private diplomacy. He mentioned this in terms of the nuclear negotiation with North Korea, back-channel talks with North Korean officials that might take place in New York or capitals around the world, and suggested that that was beneficial to diplomats being able to do their work behind closed doors and come up with some type of agreement. And I think this Comfort Women deal is an example of the perils of private diplomacy. If these details that the South Korean government was negotiating with Japan were to come out during the negotiations, if it was public diplomacy taking place, it's unlikely that we'd have this problem now, because a consensus would have needed to be developed in order for that agreement to take place, in order for Tokyo and Seoul to reach a deal. And so I think that that's really a central issue to this debate, is public versus private diplomacy.
Right, and we'll get into that, but first, the same question to you, Koichi. Did you cover the announcement?
Of course, quite many. It was a big news for Japan, and many of Japanese media was worrying about this deteriorating Japan-Korea relationship on this matter. And personally, I just feel very sad, because this was a second trial to bring some peace between two countries. We had Asia Women's Fund approach in 1995 to 2007, and this was second time. And if second round failed, then it will be extremely hard to third try. So kind of sad, yeah.
Well, President Moon Jae-in has claimed that given the recent revelations, the deal is unacceptable, which means the government here will work to see perhaps renegotiations or perhaps even annul the agreement altogether. What would be the possible diplomatic repercussions of annulling the deal?
I think Japanese government will react quite strongly on that, and but it's basically up to President Moon. And negotiations, it might be really difficult, because this agreement, this apology is basically from the liberal side's idea originally in Japan. In Japan, there is a spectrum of course, conservative and liberals, and this was liberals' idea. And conservatives was saying that there will be no meaning for apologizing. It doesn't change the relationship with South Korea. That was what conservatives was saying, and currently it looks like in Japanese side, it looks like conservatives was right. So now liberal side does not have much energy to do something again.
I see. One of the issues that is causing much anger within the public here is perhaps calls by Japan for Korea to relocate the statue that was installed outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul in 2011, and also to refrain from supporting future installations of statues. Why the sensitivity by Tokyo regarding these statues?
I think the statue in front of embassy and the statue in other place all over the world is totally two different things, because the statue in front of embassy is it looks like it is to criticize Japanese government. So it's not so nice to build a statue right in front of the embassy for political reason. But other statue in the world is to, if it is remember the victims and remember the serious violation of human rights, then I think the Japanese government should not react too sensitively, because if you act like that, then it will devalue the past apology made by Japanese government, and it's bad for Japanese public policy.
Yeah, I completely agree with Koichi. These are kind of separate issues, and actually there is a stipulation about government's responsibility to protect the atmosphere of foreign embassies within the country. Near the embassy or political displays in front of embassies are mentioned as something that the countries have a responsibility sort of to protect against. So that is a separate issue. The one of free speech, you know, people can put statues up wherever they want, except when they violate the spirit of the UN Charter in terms of protecting embassies in other countries.
What then are your thoughts regarding Tokyo's call for Seoul not to support future installations of statues, or perhaps not to use the words sex slavery and to use the word comfort women, is it, instead of that particular word? How do you respond to that, Frank?
I think that's kind of ridiculous that they agreed that they're going to use certain language when they talk about this issue, and that they're not going to fund groups that support this issue. I don't think that's something that they should have put in that agreement, and if the negotiations were more public, I'm sure that the Park administration would not have been able to include that in the deal.
I agree with that in that point. You know, it's really bad public policy for Japanese government.
Right. Some have also taken issue with the timing of the latest announcement by the task force. They claim it's unfortunate that Seoul and Tokyo are embroiled in a conflict of their own when the world, the international community, is seeking to ensure joint stance with regard to North Korea's acts of aggression. What are your thoughts, Frank?
Well, I think, you know, South Korea and Japan have already some type of different position on North Korea, and we see that what's going on right now with sort of a narrowing of relations between South and North Korea. Japan has a much more conservative position there. They much more support a hardline position on North Korea, sanctions pressure, and not so much engagement, whereas Moon Jae-in has sought engagement with North Korea. It was a campaign promise, something that he has repeatedly tried to pursue through his administration, and we're seeing that sort of hopefully bear fruit recently.
But at least, you know, we have in common, one thing in common, that the denuclearization of North Korea, and also this problem has to be solved peacefully. No war. Nobody wants war in Korean Peninsula and Japan. So I think still we have a room to cooperate.
Right. Now, why do you suppose this particular deal between Seoul and Tokyo was made back in 2015 by the Park administration? Media in China claim it was because of pressure from the US to come up with an agreement to resolve the issue once and for all. Would you see the 2015 deal as perhaps a proof of prior President Park Geun-hye's failings in diplomacy?
Sure, yeah, I think definitely again, it was a bad idea, and I think it'll be difficult to find some type of common ground on this issue between South Korea and Japan.
Well, reading the report of the task force, it looks like there were miscoordination between Blue House and MOFA in Korea. But also I have to point out that this idea of making agreement with Korea and apologizing on this issue is mostly from liberal side. So this time, very conservative leader, Prime Minister Abe, accepted that agreement. So for me, it was really, really surprising. So I can imagine how hard it was for Korean diplomats to persuade Japanese government in 2015. So in that sense, it's hard to say that, you know, to criticize the Korean diplomats. Maybe President Park Geun-hye chose not right timing. That's, you know, her misjudgment, but it's not fair to blame Korean diplomats on this, I think.
Koichi, Tokyo has drawn a very distinct line between, as we revealed, the apology that they made to the victims, that the government has chosen to make to the public, to the victims, of course, and their legal responsibility, because they allocated close to $9 million for a fund set up for the former sex slaves. Why this distinct line between legal responsibility and the apology?
Because, it's everything is stemmed from the war before 1945, and the Japanese government has many agreements with many countries. So if you revise one relationship, then it will influence all other relationships. So it's really hard to accept that point. Yeah.
Okay, well, since entering office, the Moon Jae-in administration has sought to address a number of issues that triggered public discontent under the Park Geun-hye administration. We have details in our second report. On December 28, 2015, the Park Geun-hye administration declared that the wartime sexual slavery agreement with Japan was final and irreversible.
피해자 할머니들의 명예와 존엄이 회복되고 또 마음의 상처를 치유하기 위해서는 일본 측의 조치가 신속히 그리고 합의한 바에 따라서 충실하게 이행되는 것이 가장 중요하다고 생각합니다.
However, the agreement was not welcomed by many people and instead gave rise to disappointment and anger. Now, 2 years after the agreement, the Moon Jae-in administration announced that there was a problem with the wartime sexual slavery agreement. With the new administration in office, the policies of the previous administration are being reviewed. On December 28th, the day after the secret deal within the Korea-Japan wartime sexual slavery agreement was revealed, issues over the halt in operations at the Kaesong industrial complex were also highlighted. The suspension of the Kaesong industrial complex was made by the unilateral verbal instruction of former President Park Geun-hye.
법률을 뛰어넘는 초법적 통치 행위로 이루어졌는 바 안보적 위기 상황에서 고대 정치적 행위를 하는 것이 가능하다고 하더라도 해당 조처는 적법 절차를 준수해야 한다고 생각합니다.
The companies that had been affected by the sudden decision to halt operations have demanded the government's official apology and related measures.
제자리로 들어가기를 이제 바라고 있는데 정부에서는 그 부분에 대해서 우선 재가동을 해서 원상복구 좀 해줘야 될 것 같고 국민들이 잘못 알고 있는 부분도 바로 알려줬으면 좋겠습니다.
Given the current developments, quite a few are questioning the Park Geun-hye administration's diplomatic and national security policies. Meanwhile, the review by the Moon Jae-in administration is not limited to diplomatic and national security issues. Plans for revision of history textbooks and performance-based pay at public institutions, the main policies of the Park Geun-hye administration, were also abolished after review by the current administration. Now, among the 100 national tasks to be tackled under his administration, President Moon Jae-in placed rooting out corruption at the top of the list. Would you say that recent revelations with regard to the 2015 agreement between Seoul and Tokyo are in line with such intentions of ensuring transparency?
Well, I don't think that necessarily has to do with corruption. I think more it has to do with bad diplomacy. When I think of corruption, I think of, people taking money, which happened during the Park Geun-hye administration and certainly needs to be dealt with. I do have some criticism about the politicization of this drive to root out corruption, and it seems to me that the Blue House is making too much of an effort to lead this campaign, and it shouldn't be led by the Blue House. It should be led by the prosecutor's office, by the state's prosecutor's office, and they should be the ones that are investigating and uncovering evidence of corruption. And I'm not sure that the Comfort Women deal really represents that type of corruption, although it is kind of, I thought, poorly orchestrated diplomacy. There was nobody that was trying to elicit any type of financial gain.
Do you think agreements reached between administrations and their foreign counterparts should be respected, even if they're flawed by the incoming administrations? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think so, and of course, it's if it's a democratic country, then you have to listen to your voice of your people, and maybe you can revise that. But if you revise that, how can I say, unilaterally, then of course the credibility of your foreign policy will go down.
I think that's a really, really good question and a really tough question to answer. I think diplomats, when they make these deals, they need to recognize the domestic constituents in both countries, so that they make deals that they know that the public in the other country will accept, when they know finally the details of these deals that may have been negotiated in public. It's unrealistic for the Park Geun-hye administration and even for the Abe administration, when they made this deal, to expect the South Korean public to accept it when these secret details are coming out. So I think diplomats need to be more careful in making those agreements to ensure that they're going to be accepted.
The reviews of the policies of the Park Geun-hye administration also include what the Moon Jae-in administration is calling a unilateral decision by the administration back then to halt operations at the industrial complex of Kaesong. What are the chances of perhaps operations at the Kaesong industrial complex resuming under the Moon Jae-in administration, in your opinion, Koichi?
I think it's really, really difficult. Because they shut down, there was a doubt that the money go through Kaesong complex, and it contributed for the development of nuclear missiles. So as long as this nuclear and missile problem is not solved, it's hard for any government to give North Korea just hard currency. And also, UN resolution is now banning using North Korean worker in Russia and China and other countries, so I think it's really hard.
Do you believe then that the decision to halt operations at Kaesong was inevitable, given the circumstances of the time back then?
No, I think that the Park Geun-hye administration really kind of jumped the gun and was looking for an excuse to do something, and sort of preemptively or quite quickly shut down the Kaesong industrial complex. I was a little bit surprised when that announcement happened, and when that happened, and a lot of the businessmen that are involved in Kaesong, they were surprised that it happened too, and lost a lot of money because of the sudden nature of that move.
Yeah, it was too early as a decision, but looking at the, even looking at China-North Korea relationship, there was a Chinese companies got many damage. I think it was inevitable. It was just only time difference. Maybe 1 year later, Kaesong complex had to be shut down.
And if we look at this now, in hindsight, what position would the Moon Jae-in government be in its relationship with the United States in terms of the sanctions and pressure going on if North Korea had continued like they did with the missile launches and the nuclear tests, while still carrying on the business at the Kaesong industrial complex? There would have been a lot more pressure on the Moon Jae-in administration to shut down the Kaesong industrial complex eventually anyway.
Now, we're starting the year 2018, and keeping that in mind, do you see the public here continuing its support of the current administration's efforts to review into the policies of the past administration? Frank?
Well, I think certainly Moon Jae-in's supporters will back his measures to look into what took place in the previous conservative governments. There's so much there. That's part of the big issue. There was a lot of corrupt behavior going on under the Park Geun-hye administration, and not all of that behavior has come out yet. Just in the last couple of days, you have a couple of conservative politicians being arrested for receiving improper campaign financing from, of all places, the National Intelligence Service. So there's a lot of corrupt behavior that took place that still has to bubble up. I do hope that the South Korean public does get tired of it.
Agreed. in the end, substance is people's life and mostly related to economy. And currently still, I think Korean economy is doing well. So I hope President Moon to focus on that people's life and, better future for everyone.
Right. Well, last December, a group of 1,000 Korean professors selected the 4-character proverb 파사 현정 as the proverb of 2017. Now, literally, the proverb means breaking false doctrines and bringing out the right. Well, in 2018, let's not simply satisfy ourselves with breaking false doctrines, but move further to bring out more of the right. Thank you for watching.